Thanks very much for agreeing to do this. Your talk at the IH conference next year, or this year, is called Imagination, the Untapped Resource. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it and who it's aimed at?
I first started becoming interested in using students' imagination a couple of years ago when I was doing research into a new theory of motivation, which is not so new anymore, which was first proposed by Professor Dornier, which was called the L2 Motivational Self-System, which very briefly is where students, people in fact, imagine themselves in a future situation doing the activity that they want to do, which in this case would be speaking the language well, fluently, effortlessly, comfortably. And they notice the discrepancy between where they are at the moment and where they want to be in the future, and they actively work to close that gap. And there are techniques that have been used very successfully to do this, for example, with sports psychology, with sports people. And lots of research suggests that when we imagine ourselves doing an activity, the same parts of our brain are ignited, light up, as when we're actually doing the activity. And this has been proven. So I put into practice some activities in the classroom with adult learners, they were university students, to help them to develop an ideal second language self, to imagine themselves in the future using the language. Because all too often nowadays we have students, I'm sure you have the same thing, where students come into class and say, why are you learning English? Because it's important. And it's a vague, nebulous concept. So in theory, if we can help them to develop a vivid and nuanced image of themselves using the language in the future, we can motivate them to find that gap and close the gap. Now, this isn't so easy to do, because I don't know about you, but it's not something that I'd ever done before, and I was very nervous about doing it. And these kind of activities, using the imagination, visualization, guided imagery, etc., fall under the auspices of what we call holistic or humanistic language teaching, which certainly where I work has sort of fallen out of favour in the last few years, at the expense of, or maybe because of, our headlong rush to use everything that is new and new technologies and the latest devices, which allow us to do things with our students that we've never been able to do before. This is true. If they're done well and they're used well, they are invaluable. But at the same time, if you're using the iPad or a Moodle page to do controlled practice activities from Murphy, it's still Murphy at the end of the day. And so we tend to favour new technologies over using this resource, and the title of the talk is The Underused Resource. Because we have this resource of the student in the room that maybe is a little bit neglected in favour of all the other things that we are dying to try out or dying to use with them. And not least of which is the mountain of photocopies that we tend to do. And this, when I was doing these activities, it reminded me a lot of Scott Thornberry's and Luke Medding's Dogma movement, because you have this resource in the room, which is the student. You're allowing them to set the agenda by using their own imagination to come up with the content of the class and the direction that it goes in. And by doing so, you're also allowing them to work with the emergent language at the point of need. What they actually need to express at the time is what you're providing them with. So it also works on the dogma principle of minimal resources. Now, it's not necessarily a dogma activity, because I have lots of activities that use things that I bring in. Because one of the problems with these type of activities, in my experience, is that teachers are very insecure about doing them. They feel that it may fall flat, that students might not respond well to them. So it needs a little bit of scaffolding at the beginning, not least because students may not always come armed with a very vivid imagination. If you go into a classroom and you ask students to imagine something point blank, then it'll probably fall flat because they won't be able to. So I would like to, in the talk, walk the teachers at present in the talk through the various stages of setting up these activities. And the first stage would be the groundwork, showing students why this is interesting, why it may be useful for them. And one way of winning over students, to put it in a certain way, is by relating it to sports psychology. We have a country full of sports mad people, And I did these techniques with a class full of 18-year-old economics students who were mainly boys. And I used unashamedly references to Barca and Pep Guardiola at the time, and they loved it.
Right.
And by the time we actually came to doing the techniques, they were quite
Fired
keen.
up. Good.
Yeah. And I was surprised at the reaction of the students, because I was expecting it to meet with a little bit more resistance, perhaps. But they actually enjoyed it very much. In fact, in feedback, they said it was extremely motivating because it was something they'd never done before. And in that sense, it's probably more novel than using the iPad or the Moodle page, where they are very familiar with these technologies.
Exactly. Yeah.
But something as simple as closing your eyes and imagining yourself 5 years in the future is something that they had certainly never done before in their English classes. And possibly because of the theory of discrepancy between their present and their future selves, or possibly simply because it was something new and different, it was very motivating, which brings us back full circle to where I started, because I was investigating student motivation at the time.
Right, it sounds very interesting. We look forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.